Media content is one powerful tool for sharing cultures, particularly with young audiences. I speak with Josh Selig, founder of China Bridge Content. China Bridge Content is a New York and Beijing-based content and consulting firm. Selig was working with Chinese partners for more than 3 decades, specializing in programming for children and young people. Josh, cultural diplomacy through media, it's probably something you think a lot about, or maybe not, but how would you define it?
It's an interesting question because I don't actually think about cultural diplomacy. I think about making great content. And my shows happen to be very global. And we often work with international partners, especially Chinese partners. So they end up being a form of cultural diplomacy. But I can't say that that's the goal of the company.
So talk to us about those partnerships with, like China's such a fertile market, it seems, for so many people. They want to break into it. So talk to me about getting in and creating content that kind of can resonate east to west. I mean, you're a cultural bridge in a sense.
Yeah, I've been going to China for about 30 years. The first project I worked on was called Jimaje, which was the Chinese co-production of Sesame Street. So I worked with the writing team. We had a whole team from New York who went over. We spent a lot of time with the Chinese team. And that sort of led me to this whole area of understanding that to do good co-productions, you need a lot of face-to-face contact. You need long-term partnerships. So after Sesame Street, I started a company. It was called Little Airplane Productions. We created a few shows with Chinese partners, including Super Wings with Alpha, Peking Duckling with Yu Young. These were very important shows. They got broadcast in the U.S. In the case of Super Wings, the toys have been tremendously successful globally. So I have a track record of making high-quality content that works in China and also works outside China.
And that content, does it have to be, is there something as universal as just the content applies all across the globe, or do you have to kind of tailor it?
You definitely have to tailor it. But when you work with comedy, with content for young kids, you're talking about very universal experiences. You're talking about family, you're talking about community, talking about having meals together. So these things are really quite global. And so I find that preschool shows in particular travel extremely well between China and other countries. So there is a lot of common ground, and we certainly try to mine that fertile common ground when we make our shows.
And you talk about going to MIPCOM and trying to create these kind of global partnerships. So what was it that attracted you? I mean, you're talking about 30 years. That's a significant amount of time. What was it that attracted you to China, and how do you think you landed in that basket?
I worked in a variety of countries, including China. So I worked in Poland. I worked in the Middle East. I was the producer for the Israeli-Palestinian version of Sesame Street. So I have a lot of international experience. I think the last 10 years have been particularly productive for me with the Chinese market because China is going through a renaissance when it comes to their own content. Their animation studios are excellent. They have top-of-the-line production facilities now in China. So there's been a growing sophistication in how they make content. I think where I fit in is in the storytelling side. Many of the IPs that are created within China for the domestic market tend not to travel all that well. They tend to be very specific to the Chinese domestic market. When I work with partners, I help them to make sure that the content will travel, which is to say that it's still domestic Chinese content. It still has positive cultural messages about China, but the stories can be really understood and appreciated anywhere in the world.
So in the last decade, what's that been like? What are some of the programs that you can point to and say, I feel pretty good about this?
Well, I feel great about Super Wings. So Super Wings was a cooperation between my old company, Little Airplane, a company called Funny Flux in Korea, and Alpha in China. Super Wings became a huge global success, both with media and with toys. So I did the original Bible for that show, worked on the original pilot. My studio did pre-production on the show. The production was actually done in Guangzhou at Alpha's studio. This was a really significant achievement because it was a Chinese-owned show that worked everywhere in the world. We were able to do a very big co-production deal with Kika in Germany. The show worked brilliantly in Europe. So I think if I'm able to be involved at the earliest stages of an IP, I can really help the Chinese partner to make it a global success.
It's so interesting because your work is all about narratives, I guess, in some respects, but the narrative about China is so negative, as you described it, and then clearly I see it all the time too in Western media. How do you turn that around, do you think?
Well, I think it comes back to people exchanges. And one of the things I love about my work is I'm working on a daily basis with Chinese teams in different cities. So sometimes it's face to face, sometimes it's over WeChat or Tencent Video, but we're in constant communication. I think the only way to overcome bias or fear is to really get to know people. So, I'm a really big supporter of working together in teams. I think that's the way we can really understand the nuances of each other's culture and personalities. So media is a great way to do that. Animation in particular takes a lot of people. So there's a lot of interaction between writers, storyboard artists, animators, designers. These become friendships and these lay the foundation for future generations of shows. So to me, it's really a great area in which to mix cultures, to mix creativity.
How's the landscape changed over the last 30 years, would you say, in terms of putting together programming? Is there a raft of material out there? You're competing with others where maybe it wasn't so early on, or has it always been kind of a tough slog? How would you describe it?
I would say up until COVID, the market was very good and very positive when it came to international co-productions. I think after COVID, it's been harder. I think both sides are struggling with how to see one another and struggling to see if those opportunities are going to last, given some of the geopolitical issues that are going on. I'm very positive about the Chinese-U.S. relationship. I think the two countries have benefited tremendously from their cooperation over the last 50 years. I think that we should get back to working together. I think that helps both sides tremendously. From a business point of view, I've actually had a better few years since COVID simply because there's less competition. When I used to go to Beijing, there were so many other companies who were trying to work with Chinese studios. There's very few now. People have either tried it and decided against it or struggled for one reason or another. I'm not turning my back on China. I believe in China. I believe in China and U.S. relationships. So for me, there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of potential partners and business to be done in China.
Talk to me, you've done 30 years looking towards the future, the next 5 or 10 years. You see more partnerships?
I definitely do. Yeah, I spent all of July in China. I was at 5 cities. There's a lot going on in China. It's a very robust market. There's an appetite for international partnerships. There's an openness to international partnerships. So I definitely see it as a great place to go and to do business. And for me, as I said, my business is called China Bridge Content. That's what we are. We help international folks work with China. We help Chinese companies to work with international partners. The goal is to just make great content that kids will enjoy and learn from.
One of Selig's latest projects is Vivicat, Miles Per Hour, a partnership with Beijing Meow's House, Tencent Video, and GZ Artland. It's a CGI animated comedy for teens and young adults based on the popular short-form series The Daily Life of Vivicat.
What can you tell me about Vivicat?
So Vivicat is an extraordinary project. It actually was created by a gentleman named Robin Guobin, who is a very well-known Chinese director. And his wife, her name is Vicky Zhang. She used to be the head of CCTV animation, and she's a dear friend, and we've worked together on multiple projects over the years. She retired just recently, and when I was in Beijing, I had dinner with her and her husband just as a way to thank her and to congratulate her. And over that dinner, we started talking about Vivicat. This is their passion project. They've been working on Vivicat since about 2019, and it is a gorgeous, very funny cat that's had tremendous success on Tencent Video. So they've already done 200 videos. They're doing 200 more. They have a very successful line of toys, blind box toys, at Pop Mart globally. And it's funny, I was at Pop Mart this morning near the World Trade Center, and I said, do you have any Vivicats? And they said, we're sold out. So this cat is selling globally, even though the content is only available in China. So over dinner, they said, can you help us? You're very good at the international market. So at first I said I would do it just as a friend, as a favor. And they said, no, we want to do something more formal. So we entered into an agreement, and I helped them to create a new show Bible, which is the international version of ViviCat. People love this cat. I'm confident this cat's going to be the next big thing. So it's been a really fun, exciting project.
Wow, that must be amazing to be a part of something like that. Especially, like I love the idea that it germinates at a dinner, and then it's created and it goes out there, and as you said, it has global appeal.
Yeah, I think dinners are very important in China, as you know, and I think relationships are very important in China, as you know. In the media world, in the U.S. and in Europe, it tends to be very transactional. You go to markets, you pitch, somebody sends you an offer, you sign a deal. It doesn't work that way in China. You have to get to know people over months, sometimes years, before anything actually happens. And some companies and people don't have patience for that. I happen to love it. I enjoy the long meals. I enjoy the long walks. I really like to get to know the people that I'm going to work with before I sign the deal. So, Vicky is a great example of that. And there are many other projects where they came out of friendships. Even Super Wings came out of a friendship rather than a pitch. So I like that about China. It's very honest. It's very relationship based.
I feel like when I'm here, it's one world. When I go to China, it's another world. Does it translate, or will a lot of that stuff stay there and it doesn't come here, or do you see kind of the cross-pollination?
I think both societies have so much to learn from each other. So I'm a really big advocate of not only people-to-people exchanges, but government-to-government exchanges. I just think we've benefited so much from working together. We've really built both of our economies through knowing what the other could do well. And the folks who really want to separate the societies now, I think it's misguided. I don't think it's going to help anybody, to be honest. So I really encourage these exchanges. And I do think there's a lot going on here that would be very valuable for the Chinese market. And there's a lot going on there that would be valuable here. But the door needs to be open. There need to be bridges, which is why I call the company China Bridge Content. And, it's funny, I had a dinner. One of our clients is the Museum of Asian Art at the Smithsonian. And I was at a big dinner there, and somebody said, "What's the name of your company?" And I said, "China Bridge Content." And they said, "I guess you'll be changing that, And I said, "No, I'm not changing it." And his perception was that things are becoming so chilly between the two countries that it wouldn't be a good business. But I don't agree. I think these are the two largest economies in the world. They will always need each other.
Yeah, and there needs to be foot soldiers like yourself actually out there, out front, continuing that narrative and creating the bridges. So thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Thank you for your time.